Henry thought the college reunion would be a few hours of small talk and awkward handshakes. He never expected his ex-wife to stand in the center of the room, smiling at their former classmates while calling him a failed husband and a useless father. Laughter rippled through the crowd. He stood frozen, a black single dad with no defense, no rebuttal, just silence. Then, at the exact moment his humiliation peaked, a woman walked toward him. She was elegant, powerful, and utterly calm. She slipped her arm through his and said one word. "Honey." Who was she, and why was she on his side? Before we dive into this story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you're new here and enjoy stories about real life, dignity, and unexpected moments that change everything, hit that subscribe button and join our community. Now, let's get back to Henry. The evening sun cast long shadows across the living room as Henry adjusted his tie in the hallway mirror. Behind him, 7-year-old Serena sat cross-legged on the couch, watching her father with curious eyes. "Daddy, why are you dressed so fancy?" Henry turned to face his daughter. "Remember I told you about my college friends? We're having a little party tonight." Serena tilted her head. "But you never go to parties. You always stay home with me." She was right. In the 3 years since the divorce, Henry had built his life around two things: his job as a mid-level manager at a financial firm, and his daughter. Weekends meant trips to the park, not nights out. Evenings meant bedtime stories, not social events. He had declined every invitation, every opportunity to reconnect with old friends, because being present for Serena mattered more than anything else. "Your grandmother thinks I need to get out more," Henry said, kneeling down to meet Serena's eyes. "And maybe she's right. Just this once." Serena considered this for a moment, then nodded with the seriousness only a child could muster. "Okay, but you have to promise to come back and read me a story." "I promise, baby girl. I'll be home before you know it." His mother, Ruth, appeared in the doorway. At 62, she carried herself with the quiet strength of a woman who had raised 3 children on her own after her husband passed. She looked at Henry with knowing eyes. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone tonight," she said. "Remember that." Henry kissed Serena's forehead, grabbed his car keys, and headed out into the cooling night air. His mother's words echoed in his mind as he drove toward the restaurant. He had spent his whole life not trying to prove anything. He worked hard, kept his head down, and focused on what mattered. But somehow, the world always seemed to demand more from men who looked like him. The restaurant was upscale, the kind of place with white tablecloths and soft jazz playing in the background. Henry arrived 15 minutes late, having circled the block twice while debating whether to just turn around and go home. When he finally walked through the door, he immediately felt out of place. Groups of his former classmates clustered around the bar and scattered tables, their laughter filling the room. Some had grown prosperous, their success evident in tailored suits and expensive watches. Others looked tired, worn down by the years. Henry recognized a few faces but found himself gravitating toward the edges of the room, nursing a glass of water and exchanging polite nods with people he barely remembered. Then he saw her. Ellie stood near the center of the room, holding a glass of champagne and commanding attention the way she always had. Even after 3 years, the sight of his ex-wife sent a complicated mixture of emotions through his chest. She was beautiful, confident, and completely at ease. Beside her stood a tall white man in an expensive suit, his arm draped possessively around her waist. Her new husband, Henry realized, the one she had married less than a year after their divorce, was finalized. For a moment, Henry considered leaving. He could slip out the door, drive home, and read Serena her bedtime story. No one would notice. No one would care. But before he could move, Ellie's eyes found his across the room. Her smile widened, but there was something sharp in it, something that made Henry's stomach tighten. "Henry!" she called out, her voice carrying over the ambient noise. Everyone! Look who finally showed up! Heads turned. People he hadn't spoken to in years suddenly focused their attention on him. Henry forced a polite smile and raised his hand in a small wave, hoping that would be the end of it. It wasn't. Ellie detached herself from her husband and glided toward Henry, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. A small crowd followed, drawn by her energy and the promise of entertainment. "It's been so long," Ellie said, stopping a few feet away from him. "I was just telling everyone about the old days. You know, back when we were married." The way she said married made it sound like a joke, like a youthful mistake that everyone should laugh about. A few people chuckled nervously. "Ellie," Henry said, keeping his voice neutral, "you look well." "I am well," she replied, gesturing toward her husband who had joined the growing circle. "Richard has been wonderful. He actually takes me on vacations, can you believe it? We just got back from the Maldives." More laughter from the crowd. Henry said nothing. Ellie's smile never wavered, but her eyes grew harder. "I was just telling Sarah here about how things were between us, how you were always working, never present. Remember how you used to come home and just sit in front of the TV? I practically raised Serena by myself those first few years." Henry felt the heat rising in his chest, but he kept his expression calm. This was a trap, and he knew it. Ellie had always been skilled at rewriting history, at painting herself as the victim in a story where the truth was far more complicated. "That's not how I remember it," he said quietly. Ellie laughed, a bright, brittle sound. "Of course you don't. You were never paying attention." She turned to address the crowd, her voice rising. "Did you know he's a single dad now? Raising Serena all by himself. I give him credit for trying, I really do. But some people just aren't cut out for it." The words hit Henry like a physical blow. He saw the way people looked at him, saw the mixture of pity and judgment in their eyes. A few exchanged glances that said everything without speaking a word. A black man who couldn't keep his family together. A father playing a role he wasn't equipped for. "Ellie," Richard said, placing a hand on his wife's shoulder, "maybe we should—" "I'm just being honest," Ellie interrupted, shaking off his touch. "Someone has to be. Henry never could stand up for himself. That was always the problem. No ambition, no drive, just existing, day after day, while I did all the heavy lifting." Henry's jaw tightened. He could defend himself. He could tell everyone how Ellie had been the one to walk out, how she had left him with a 4-year-old daughter and a stack of divorce papers. He could explain how he had fought for custody, how the judge had sided with him because Ellie couldn't be bothered to show up for the hearings. He could say all of that, but he didn't, because he knew how it would look. A black man arguing with his ex-wife in public, raising his voice, showing emotion. He had spent his entire life avoiding that stereotype, refusing to give anyone a reason to see him as the angry black man they expected him to be. So he stayed silent, even as Ellie's words cut deeper with each passing second. "See?" Ellie said, gesturing at him with her champagne glass. "Nothing to say, just like always. You know what your problem is, Henry? You think being quiet makes you noble, but it doesn't. It just makes you weak." The room had grown uncomfortably silent. People shifted on their feet, unsure whether to intervene or simply watch the spectacle unfold. Henry felt the weight of their stares, felt himself shrinking under the collective judgment of people he hadn't seen in over a decade. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out and saw a text from Serena. "Daddy, when are you coming home? I miss you." Something cracked inside him. Here he was, standing in a room full of strangers, being humiliated by a woman who had abandoned their daughter, while that same daughter waited at home for a bedtime story. What was he doing here? What was he trying to prove? Henry put his phone away and took a step toward the door. "There he goes," Ellie announced to the room, her voice dripping with satisfaction. "Running away. That's what he does best. That's why I had to leave him." He stopped. His back was to the crowd, but he could feel every eye on him. This was the moment of maximum humiliation, the point where anything he did would be wrong. Turn around and fight, and he's the angry black man. Walk away, and he's the coward who couldn't face his own failures. Stay silent, and he admits to everything Ellie accused him of. For 3 long seconds, Henry stood frozen, caught between impossible choices. Then a voice cut through the silence, a woman's voice, calm and authoritative, coming from the entrance behind him. "Honey, I'm so sorry I'm late. The meeting ran longer than expected." Henry turned around slowly, not quite believing what he had heard. A woman stood in the doorway of the restaurant, her presence commanding immediate attention. She wore a tailored charcoal dress that spoke of quiet wealth, and her dark hair was pulled back in an elegant twist. Her eyes swept across the room with the calm assessment of someone accustomed to being in charge, and when her gaze landed on Henry, she smiled warmly and walked toward him. Before Henry could say a word, she slipped her arm through his and leaned in close enough for her perfume to reach him. "I hope I didn't keep you waiting too long," she said, loud enough for the surrounding crowd to hear. Then, softer, just for him. "Play along." Ellie's champagne glass had frozen halfway to her lips. The smugness on her face flickered, replaced by confusion. "I'm sorry, and you are?" The woman turned to Ellie with a polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Kara Palmer. I'm a friend of Henry's." "A friend," Ellie repeated, her tone skeptical. She looked Kara up and down, taking in the expensive dress, the understated diamond earrings, the quiet confidence that radiated from every pore. "I didn't realize Henry had friends who called him honey." Kara's smile widened slightly. "Well, there's a lot about Henry you might not know anymore." "It has been 3 years, hasn't it?" The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Henry could feel the dynamic in the room changing, the attention that had been focused on his humiliation now redirecting toward this unexpected development. Ellie's eyes narrowed, and Henry recognized the look. She was recalculating, trying to figure out who this woman was and what threat she posed. "Henry never mentioned you," Ellie said, her voice carrying an edge. "And I thought I knew all his friends from college." "We didn't meet in college," Kara replied smoothly. "We worked together." Richard, Ellie's husband, had been watching the exchange with growing interest. Now he stepped forward, his businessman's instincts clearly activated. "Kara Palmer," he said, as if testing the name. "That sounds familiar. Have we met?" Before Kara could answer, a voice called out from across the room. "Wait a minute!" A man Henry vaguely recognized from his economics classes pushed through the crowd. "Kara Palmer, as in the CFO of Hartwell Financial?" The murmuring started immediately. Henry saw recognition dawn on several faces, including Richard's. Hartwell Financial was one of the largest investment firms on the East Coast. Its CFO would be exactly the kind of person Richard would want to impress. "Guilty as charged," Kara said lightly, as if her position were no more significant than being a local accountant.